I think there's three landmark things that have happened in this country when it comes to public education. So one of them was compulsory education, where it meant that all kids had to attend school. The second one was that students, regardless of color of their skin or race, were entitled, had the right to be educated in integrated schools. The third one was a recognition that poor children might need more resources, the Title I. So those are three really important things that have happened in education. And I'll add now the fourth one to be the Common Core. That's how the impact that it will have. So here's what the Common Core standard, I'm not going to read this, but just to say that they are really aligned to college and work expectations. The only thing I want to emphasize is that there's a confusion that people think that these standards are about getting students ready for college. They are. But they're also about getting students ready for the workforce if they decide when they graduate from high school not to go to college right away. So there's a lot of studies that show that the skills that you need in the workforce nowadays are equivalent to the skills you need to college. Just think of an auto mechanic. With the advances in technology, it's not the same thing as it was 50 or 60 years. So the level of skills are the same. So that's basically it. And this was a state-led. It was a state-led initiative. It did not begin with the federal government. It did not begin with the federal government. It was the National Governor Association, 48 governors at that time. 48 governors got together and thought this was a good idea, as well as the Council of State Superintendents from all. And then they partnered with several organizations and launched this. Why is this important? So, every state right now has a set of standards. A set of standards that are so different and a different definition of proficiency. And let me make it a little more real about why this is so important. When I was the deputy superintendent in Hartford, Connecticut, as you can see, I move a lot, and Cindy was right, I can't keep a job. So when I was the deputy superintendent in Hartford, Connecticut, I could have a student who was deemed proficient on the CMT, the Connecticut Mastery Test, in reading, writing, and math. And that student then, the next day, would move to the neighboring state of Massachusetts, which from Hartford to Springfield, Mass, is only a 35-minute drive. That same student would no longer be proficient. Why? Because Massachusetts has one of the most rigorous standards in the country and one of the most rigorous assessments. So what were we doing in Connecticut and in Hartford? Lying to our kids, saying you are proficient, but God forbid, you will be living in Massachusetts because you'll no longer be considered proficient. So that was it's a big issue. That's why this is important. The set of proficiency is important. The other piece that I'm really excited about why I think, has anybody here worked in more than one state as an educator? Many of you, like me, I've worked in 4 states. So you know that every time you move from one state to another in education, you have to learn a new set of standards and a new set of assessments. What a waste of time. So if a teacher moves from one state to another, let's say from California to Colorado, I can tell you, even though that teacher might be an experienced teacher, is not ready to teach on day one, because don't know the assessment and the standards. They need to. I've been in LA now as the deputy superintendent a little over a year, and I'm still trying to learn the California state standard and the assessment. That doesn't happen if you're a physician and you move from one state to another. It doesn't seem to they have different standards. So it would be very helpful for us as educators to be able to do that. Now, the other piece is that why this is important, because I think we'll be able to share best practices. So when the gentleman here asked about English learner, for the first time, if we have something in California that is working for our second language learners, which by the way, in California, we are the district with the largest English learner population. 30% of our district are second language learners. 200,000 students, almost triple the amount of students you have in JEPCO, are second language learners. So we have to make sure they are successful, because if not, we're not going to succeed. But if we find something, a program, a strategy that works, you could implement it here, because the standards are the same. In the past, we couldn't, because there were different standards. So that's going to be very, very helpful. And the last bullet is that students are now competing. They're not competing only with jobs here in Colorado and JEPCO, but throughout the country and in a global market. And that is essential. I know I get upset, we all get upset when we hear that we are outsourcing jobs to India. The reality is that if a student is better prepared in India in terms of mathematics or English, the business world will go with them, because they want a prepared workforce. Okay, and talking about that, let me share with you this slide that you don't have. So this talks about how the U.S. is doing. We're barely keeping pace with the rest of the world. And what you have here is basically the growth, improvement of 49 countries from a 14-year period, 1995 to 2009. 2009. So the solid line in the middle represents the average growth of improvement that has been seen in these 49 countries. Okay? So what you notice there, and if you see the United States is the one in black. Okay? So you see that there has been improvement in the U.S. in the last 14 years. They're way up, but just on the average. But if you notice, look at all the countries whose improvement in this same period has been far greater. Far greater, including places like Chile, Brazil, not considered the high industrialized. But you also have places like Finland, China, who keep growing, and they're going to outcompete us in terms of that. Obviously, there's some that have not shown any growth, actually shown decline. So that's really important to say. This is the state. These are the states, and I think I have them. The states, and look at Colorado. So Colorado, I didn't bold it, but it's above the average. So there is slightly above the average. There's some growth in the improvement in the state of Colorado, but not like the rest. There are probably 13 other states that are doing far better in terms of improvement in this same year period. So it's good. It's good that we've seen improvement, but we have to accelerate it if we want to compete in the global market. Now, let me show you why the Common Core is going to be so important. It goes to the question about rigor. So here's the discrepancy between the state proficiency, how states define proficiency in reading, and how NAEP defines proficiency in reading. Okay? So the line that's right under 240 is what is considered to be proficient in NAEP in 4th grade reading. And this is where Colorado is. So you see the gap? This is in 2009. So once I'm saying that because even when you are saying, we're saying that Colorado on the CSAP is saying a student is proficient, that does not compare to a level of proficiency for NAEP. And the new standards are more aligned to NAEP. And the assessment, you will see, aligned to NAEP, which means that when it comes in 2014, 15, and you administer your new test, you're going to see a decline of your students being proficient because of this gap. Okay? So but we can do a lot to get ready, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So, but this is a pattern across the country. No state has the equivalent definition of proficiency as determined by NAEP. None. All of them are below basic. Almost all of them. The ones in blue are basic, a little higher. Okay? So that's why, if you go back to this one, do you think that, I don't know if a business person will want to hire somebody from Tennessee, that the state of Tennessee says that is proficient in reading? Look how low they are. They're the lowest in terms of that. And I know Tennessee has worked to increase their rigor. The same pattern in eighth grade. Colorado, here, a little higher. The same. Now we have actually our standards, our definition of proficiency for eighth grade reading is better as a country. So we have more basic. So here's again, it's just a summary. And you see where Colorado, I have circled it, is both in reading in 4th and 8th grade is below basic in terms of the equivalent of what it will be in NAEP. The same pattern in mathematics for 4th grade math, again. And there it is, a little better in 8th grade, but still basic and the same pattern. So as you can see, we need to do something to make sure that we are increasing the rigor. So going back to this led the Common Core to actually look for evidence. So when they were developing the standards, they were evidence-driven. So they looked at evidence from other countries, high-performing countries, and high-performing states. States that had better standards or better results on NAEP to help them develop these standards. Here are some of the countries that they looked at when they were developing in terms of being high performing. You see in mathematics and in English. They're no random order, they're just actually in alphabetical order. In math, they didn't care in what language of instruction. So you see in Belgium, the language of instruction was Flemish. It's just a performance. But in English language art, obviously, they look for countries where language arts was taught in English. And I want to point out Singapore. Because Singapore is traditionally known for doing really, really well in mathematics. But they also outperformed by 24 scale score points the U.S. in English language arts. And I don't know if anybody knows anything about Singapore. So Singapore has 4 mother tongues. 4 mother tongues. None of them are English. Even though now English is the official language, but they have 4 mother tongues. And what they decided about 50 or 60 years ago was that all students were going to be educated in English. So they are technically second language learners. So they learn in English, and at the same time they continue maintaining their mother tongue. So they are outperforming native speakers of English. And I am not one of those that say that we should be adopting an educational system or policy from a foreign country. No. Why? Because they're totally different. They're totally different. One of the beauty of this country is we teach all kids. Not all countries do that. Not all countries do that. But I do think that it's good to learn from them and see what are some of the best practice that we can learn and see how we can help it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, which of these countries do teach all kids? So, those are the ones that we really need to look at.
Correct.
Compare ourselves to, because a lot of these countries exclude the kids that are tested.
So, great question. So, Singapore does teach all kids. Singapore does. Ireland, too. They do all kids. So those are England, too. So those are the ones. But remember, that's why I said, Australia, yes. So and those are the things that, but it's a good point. Remember, I'm not saying let's adopt, but that's what the authors of the Common Core said, let's look at some of the things that they have done well and how do they apply to us.